Hello, everyone. Welcome back to just another esports podcast. Once again, you're joined by me, your host, Nicholas Shady Bacon, and Mr. Kevin Hubris. We do not have a special guest this time, but we have some crazy series to cover as this past weekend for the Dallas home series was a bit wacky. A bunch of, I guess, maybe upsets, quote unquote, you could call them. Our predictions were by far the worst they have ever been. Only two series we guessed right, with both of the teams matching up. And most of them were nulled because we either messed up one of the earlier group matchups or it just was not very pretty. And so congratulations to the Florida Mutineers. They did end up winning the event.
Go baby.
However, it was a long and turbulent road. And so I say we kind of jump right into it with our first matchup in that weekend on the Friday was Florida versus Toronto. And here we did see an upset. Florida, who won this event, lost to Toronto 3-2.
Maybe they threw. Who loses to Toronto, really? Like,
Well, I don't know if I said this in the one where the audio, we didn't get it, or if I'd said it in the prior episode when we re-recorded it, but I did say Toronto actually hasn't been that bad. They've had some very close series. Yes, their match record is wrong, or not wrong. Their match record is pretty bad since I believe they only have 10 points, I believe. But they've played a lot of matches and they had a lot of drawn out series to the point where I believe they've only not gone to a game 5 twice in all of their matches, which is kind of crazy. So they've been very close to winning a bunch of these series, but they've never been able to kind of clutch up and actually bring home the W outside of here against Florida in the first matchup that we did see.
yeah, and I think that's important to note because I do think that Toronto does have the makings of a CDL team. It's not, why are they here? Why aren't they in challengers? But I think this tournament's a big testament just in general to the teams actually kind of coming around and showing that they are in fact CDL teams. All of them have the ability to beat whoever on any given day, and I think that this was a time to shine for quite a few teams. So it is unfortunate that we all were pretty high on. Well, we weren't even really high on Florida. We were just kind of low on Toronto,
Yeah.
and it was first loss of the weekend, and I think that Toronto will eventually figure it out. I think this is a good thing for Toronto fans.
Yeah, and I think probably one of the biggest reasons why Toronto was able to win this series was simply because of how lackluster the Florida Mutineers squad has been looking in Search and Destroy, which you wouldn't really think when you kind of look at the lineup that they do have with Mox, Havoc, and then Pharaoh being added to the roster. You would think they would be a relatively decent Search and Destroy team. However, the Florida Mutineers broke a record this weekend, and it's not a record you really want to break. It was the longest losing streak in Search and Destroy, which was previously held by the Seattle Surge at 6. The Florida Mutineers broke that at 7. They had not won an S&D since their reverse sweep against Chicago
Yeah,
at the what home series was that? It
Atlanta.
was, yes, at the Atlanta home event. And they were finally able to start picking up wins again. Their last 3 search and destroys that they actually played at this event were all wins. They played one against Toronto on Saturday and then against Chicago and Minnesota on Sunday. But before then, they had a 7-game S&D losing streak.
Yeah, that's
And
that's pretty
that's
bad.
definitely a factor that helped Toronto take the W over them. They had a 6-0 search and destroy against them on Gunrunner, and then on the Ramazda, they had a 6-3. So
Well,
the search and destroys weren't even close. And even the ones that they did win, though, when they did win against Toronto on Saturday, the Florida Mutineers only won 6-5, incredibly close. They could have, well, I guess that was the first S&D, so they wouldn't have been out if they had lost that. Against Chicago, they won 6-4, and then they had more convincing S&D against a strong Minnesota team on one of their potentially better maps since they have looked extremely strong on Piccadilly against FaZe. However, against other teams, maybe they haven't looked as good. Having, I believe, a 2-2 record, Minnesota currently does have on Piccadilly. Both of their wins against the Atlanta FaZe and both of their losses against other teams. But yeah, it was definitely a ramping up. It felt like for the Florida Mutineers
Oh,
throughout the
for
event. They just
sure.
kept on getting better and better.
Yeah, they were charging their spirit bomb for sure. I think to go back a little bit on what you were talking about with search though, it is important to note that Toronto's probably strongest point currently is probably their search game they
Definitely is their search game.
because I mean, well, first they have Methods, and Methods is S&D mastermind. He has been for a long time. He's been in the game long enough to see just about everything, and he has just this like sixth sense for it. And that's probably the most dominant reason why Methods is playing in CDL right now. Like the most pressing thing is, hey, by the way, you have this guy on your team because you want to win Search and Destroys. Whenever he got picked up by Optic in World War II, it was because they wanted to win Search and Destroys. So that was something that it was kind of writing was on the wall when it went to Game Five, especially since Florida was underperforming. Yeah, I do think that Toronto. It's not fair to say that Florida had a really long losing streak against some really strong S&D teams, and I think that Seattle will be really quick to reclaim that, as we will see in this tournament.
They do have a ways to go before they reclaim that title. They're currently on a 5 S&D loss streak. Seattle is, so they need 3 more search and destroy losses to reclaim that unholy crown. But yeah, speaking on Toronto again, yeah, their search and destroys 100% their best game mode. They currently have a 6-7 record in that, which that being their best game mode and them having a 6-7 record, which is obviously a losing record.
Yeah.
It's not really a good look. Their hard point, they're currently at 6-12, and their domination, they're at 3-6. So both of those are at, I guess, that's not really a 50% since they've lost or they've won half that they've lost. I don't really know how you put that up, but it's at 1/3. They've won a third of their hard point and their domination games. So definitely keep on doing well in the search and destroy Toronto and bring up those respawn game modes
Yeah.
just a bit, and you guys
Just just a bit. Yeah.
might be able to not be last place. Moving on to our second matchup, though, which was the Dallas Empire versus the LA Guerrillas. All of us got this one correct, thankfully. I know you guys kind of converted me into an LA Guerrillas believer by saying, "Oh yeah, Blast is so good online. Blast is so good
I
online.
mean, he
They're
is.
going to do amazing."
They
And
did.
Blast did do good. However, the rest of the team did not do very good.
Yeah. No. No. No.
And
No. This was
I feel a bit lied to. I know we all got this one correct, and so I don't want to harp on it too much. But later on, like, come on, you guys convinced me that the Gorillas were gonna do something, and then they did absolutely nothing.
all
The
right.
only person on the team that was positive was Blast at a 1.12. Then every single other person on the team was vastly negative. Outside of Decimate, he was at a 0.92, which is relatively okay. But when the rest of the team, outside of him and Blast, are averaging like a 0.8,
Yeah.
wow.
No. It's yeah. JCap's as one player on your team is bad. JCap's as 3 players on your team is not very good. So I think that the Gorillas definitely like we were high on them because of how well they were performing in scrims, and Blast is still the truth. Like kids, kids nuts. It was really fun watching him this entire tournament because he just seemed like he was all over the map. That being said, yeah, I mean, still Dallas. Like we knew that
Yeah,
Dallas was
it
gonna
still
be
is Dallas. Dallas is a good team,
yeah,
and we did
arguably
all
top
think
three.
Dallas was going to take it. So,
Yeah,
and I do want to mention girls again. They got forfeited because Aqua disconnect and then Decimate left. Those guys have been in the scene long enough. They're not the rookies. They should know not to leave a map mid-series. I mean, come on. You have two
right.
amateurs joining the team, and they know the rules better than you guys.
Yeah,
Read the rule book, please. So a little unlucky there. And after that, they were able to bounce back pretty well. They had a very close Hackney hardpoint against the Empire at 250 to 244. So even with how much of a deficit they did have in the Hackney hardpoint, this potentially could have gone to a game 5 really easily.
yeah, and it's kind of unfortunate that they did disconnect because I think out of any day for players to disconnect, this was probably the worst one because it lost a lot of value in the tournament, and now the biggest story from this tournament is not that the Florida Mutineers won, but is online considered a major event right now? And I think we should probably touch on that a little bit because I'm pretty strong. I have a pretty strong feeling about it. But this was
I would
the
count it.
I 100% would count this. I mean, I tweeted it out. I was like, look, you gotta understand that right now we're in a global pandemic. This is a big deal. You know, way bigger than a lot of things. You got to think how many sports, like real sports, got canceled. Like, football, or not football, basketball, soccer, baseball,
The
basketball.
Olympics.
Like the Olympics got canceled. Mecca's closed. Like, uh, you know, it, be fortunate that we still have Call of Duty. Like at least we have something to watch and be entertained with, and this is the only way we can play right now. So yes, of course this is a major event. It's like Modern Warfare 3 whenever they didn't have dedicated like private match servers or whatever. you know
Yeah,
they did.
and a bunch of the pros all count those, and the competition back in the day was nowhere near as competitive as it is now.
Yeah,
So,
Crim6 is a 33-time world champ whenever we were playing like Call of Duty in basements, like not to discredit a lot of the stuff that he's done recently, but half of those, a good amount of those have definitely been times when Call of Duty was still coming up as an esport. So,
and there
like,
was probably really only like four actually good teams at the events.
yeah, and one of them was Complexity, and this is back when Parasite was a pro player. So, it's been a long time. Anyway, it was writing was on the wall for this one as far as Dallas LA Gorillas go. Dallas has been a solid performer. They're still a top three team in my eyes, and they performed really well this tournament. And even though it was a virtual home stage, like you had to still kind of like give them that like home field advantage because they Dallas, they're a good team. We were really high on them I was really high on them in the beginning of the season, and I still am. And
I think most people were. I think pretty much everyone had Dallas at least in the top three.
oh, for sure. And I still think that Dallas is probably still a top three team. I mean, they've been consistently making the semifinals or the finals in every major event, and I don't see that going away anytime that they are going to be setting foot in the CDL event. So I think that this one is about wrapped up. I don't really have anything else to say. I won't
I
say
don't
anything else.
either. And so we'll move on to our Group B matchup. An incredibly close matchup. I was really hoping my Seattle boys would pull it out.
Upset alert.
Unfortunately, this win does go to you, Kevin. You got it right. Paris does beat Seattle. It was an incredibly close Game 5, Round 11, Search and Destroy, which just went the way of Paris. Come on,
You,
Seattle. You
you know what it
guys
was?
got to get those. You guys got to win those.
You know what it was? It was Friday Paris. It was not Saturday Paris. So,
Friday Paris didn't look that good if they're going to a Game 5 against Seattle.
hey, they went to a game 5, and as soon as like I saw that it was going to a game 5, I immediately put 2-3 Paris into our actual right then and
And
there.
then when it went to round 11, were you kind of like,
No,
maybe I jinxed it?
yes, yeah. I mean, that was probably in, like the back of my mind, but at the end of the day, like Paris is a much better search and destroy team than Seattle. Seattle has made a lot of improvements, but they're still terrible. So, and I don't
Yeah.
see them unless I don't even know who they play in. Are they in Chicago? Yeah, they are. They play the Gorillas next event, first game. I I don't see them winning a search then either. Honestly, like I think the only teams
Yeah,
that
they did 3-0 of them at Los Angeles, but that was a very new LA Gorillas team. And
yeah, it was
also,
whenever.
they seemed incredibly deflated after their throw against the LA Optic.
Oh man, yeah, that was terrible. I think the only team that Seattle can beat in search in this next event, probably New York, probably maybe LA. Maybe they might take one off LA.
All right. Well, currently
Yeah, oh yeah,
Seattle
sorry.
has currently Seattle has 3 search and destroy wins and 12 losses in the mode. So really, really bad. They
Terrible.
have not played Piccadilly at all in search and destroy. Every single time they played Arclog Peak, they have lost. So they have a 0-3 map record there. Gunrunner, they are 1-4. Ramazda, they are 0-2. And their best search and destroy mode is Petrograd, where they are at 2-3. Their wins have been against the LA Guerrillas, as well as Minnesota and the LA Guerrillas once again. So
Yeah, but
they are currently 2-3 against the LA Guerrillas, or 2-1
yeah, two
map
and one.
record in S&D against the LA Guerrillas. So if they're going to take an S&D, that seems to be one of the teams to do it against.
Right.
However, I
Hopefully.
believe most of the teams are, unless Seattle is just godly at Piccadilly, and that's the one that keeps getting banned. I'm not sure if they're banning that or if the other team is. If it was me seeing that St. Petrograd's their best search and destroy map, at least from the data that we have, I would probably ban that and then probably force them on Arklov Peak, as that's been by far their worst one.
It just makes sense to ban the one that you keep losing and the one that everybody's actually really good at. We had the same problem at Ohio State, and I argued back and forth, back and forth. I was like, oh, we should ban this, we should ban that. I'm like, dude, we're actually really good at Piccadilly search, really good at Piccadilly search, and most people don't want to play it, and everybody wants to play Arklov, and we are like mediocre at best at Arklov. Everybody else has a lot more
Yeah.
practice than on Arklov. That's really what it comes down to. Is sometimes you just have to be like, you know what, we're okay at it, but everybody else is great at it. And I feel like that's something that teams need to start thinking about. Is I understand that Arklov is a fan favorite. It's a popular one. You want to watch it for the entertainment, but at the end of the day, you're trying to win the game. You got to ban that immediately. Like Seattle should be banning Arklov every single time, and I don't know why they continue to play it because it is hands down their worst search map.
Pretty much all the maps are very bad for them, so it's kind of hard. And in my eyes, I see that there's three different reasons why you should be banning a map. One, it's their best map,
Yeah,
and you're just okay at it, which that's just clear map record.
which is usually
That's
like
easy to
Arklov.
do. Another reason I feel someone should be banning a map is I saw this last year, and it ticked me off at some of the events. You'd have 100 Thieves, and everyone would ban, I believe it was Hacienda Hardpoint against them. And so throughout the entire event, they probably racked up around 6 games on one of the other Hardpoint maps. They just kept on playing in the series because everyone was banning Hacienda as their best map. And I believe they didn't lose a single time they played the other default map. Just
Oh,
ban that
frequency.
map then. Ban that map. They're so used to playing on that map because they played it the whole event. Obviously, the other events were a lot longer. You got a lot more repetitions. But you ban that map and force them to play something else, maybe their entire game flow is thrown off.
Yeah,
If they're stuck in such a repetitive state of playing this map over and over and over again, and clearly they're good at it because they've been winning every single time, why not try something different, ban it, and see if they can't make that mid-event adjustment?
I 100% agree, and I think that's the exact case for Arklov because I think that there's a lot of teams out there that are absolutely lights out in Arklov. I mean, Chicago's one of them. Minnesota's another great team at Arklov, and there's some teams that are just not that good. And if you're not that good, you're gonna lose to Arklov because it's one of those that people just play over and over and over again. And teams like Seattle, teams like Dallas, even teams like Gorillas that just aren't that great at it, probably should look at banning Arklov because it's just clearly things are not going well for you. And it's one of those things that it's honestly it's a fan favorite. It's probably the most popular search map. So
And
I agree. Like it's just your banning should be a lot more intuitive, and I think that Seattle is not going that way and letting Arklov be whatever it needs to be. They'd probably be pretty good at Piccadilly. Well, do they have a sniper? Anybody sniping?
um, Octane, I guess. Octane and Pander.
Pander? Yeah, Pander could snipe. I wouldn't want Octane to snipe. Octane would be dirt nasty at Piccadilly. Piccadilly's like a 3 AR, 1 MP5, and a sniper map for search. So, like, you kind of don't want to take the AR out of Octane's hands whenever he's arguably still the best AR in the game, and it just makes sense. Arklov, yeah, there's some good AR routes, but that one's such a versatile one. There's so many times where people will just be like, You know what? Let's shock them real quick. They run their smoke out B. They run four MP5s down their lane and then plant within 15 seconds. And the guy on top B didn't even see him coming, or it was like, "Hey, you guys need to come back over here." So that's something that's kind of annoying with Arklov is that you can play it in a bunch of different ways, and I feel like Seattle's pretty rigid when it comes to search. So it's one of those things. Karma could snipe.
Moving Karma, yeah,
JK.
Karma could snipe potentially. We'll
Karma.
have to see.
Here's the thing.
Against some of the other snipers in the league, though, I don't
No.
know if that's really what I would want. We haven't seen a sniper in a while. You'd have to probably brush off some rust, some dust, and see if he can get it to boot. But
Karma's got the
yeah, I
he's
don't
got
know if
the
that's the
formula in his
play.
head. He still does. I mean, I believe in the three rings, right? I believe in him. And it's one of those things that yeah, he's getting a little older. He's going kind of the route of aches and he's, just putzing along a little bit here and there. He's not the worst player in Seattle, but, he's only got so much longer. He needs to change something in order for Seattle to get into that top tier, that upper echelon. Whenever you hear names like Octane and Apathy and Karma and Pander and
I think all of Seattle really needs to change something,
other than
to be
Octane,
honest,
other than Octane,
because I mean, even Octane maybe, because I was going to bring this up the next time we saw him, but so every single person that played at this event in Hardpoint, and you go to, I believe it's their lowest KD, everyone was at least above or at least below a 1.0 in their lowest KD. Octane, his lowest KD in Hardpoint was at a 1.33.
yeah, he's nasty.
Now that to me, and I want you to counter this if you can, because you probably can. But to me, that seems like a glaring issue in the way he is playing the map. If he is if his lowest KD is a 1.3 and they're not winning hard points.
Yeah, I can see the argument being made for him kind of playing a little weird and everything, but he's just playing like the anchor, the main AR spot in a lot of these maps, and his team is just not winning the gunfights around him. So it's great and all that you play the anchor, you play that, you play those power spots. In some points, they can win those pretty well. You think like a Gunrunner P2 or sorry P3 in Cole. If he gets on that Cole and he stays there as a power spot, and it's really hard to break him out. But that's really the only time that any anchor main AR can really play on the hill. After that, it's just kind of all right. Well, you watch a lane, you watch where they're spawning, and you pick off as people as they come. And that's
Move out of the hill then. I don't think Octane should be in the hill. You
no,
look at the players that are in the hill for the majority, like look at Florida for example. Their ARs were never in the hill. The only player I ever saw in the hill was Havoc,
no,
pretty much throughout the entire tournament.
and that's what I'm saying is I think that Octane's playing right. I don't think that he's playing wrong in comparison to what most teams are doing. What I'm saying is that his his MP5s in Pander and Karma can not win a gunfight. Like they can't win gunfights. They're losing, and they're probably not pushing right, or the pushes are really predictable, and it's kind of pitiful. You got to get on the point and you got to break stuff whenever you don't get the rotations. You're not always going to get the rotation, and if you don't get the rotation, you're taking the AR out of the equation most of the times until you break it and you get set up. And I think that that might be an issue is that Octane never really does truly get set up. But everything that I've watched so far, Octane's doing exactly what every other main AR is doing. And if I were to like if somebody was like I want to play main AR in Call of Duty, who should I watch? I would definitely recommend Octane. So I don't think Octane's a problem. I really don't.
Yeah, and I don't want it to seem like I'm saying Octane's the entire problem.
Oh,
I
absolutely not.
think he's just a small part of the problem. And that's simply by me looking at his stats. I'll pay more attention to his playstyle this weekend specifically. I'm going to watch him on the minimap for all of the Seattle games because if the lowest KD he's having in a hard point is a 1.33 and his team, I don't think how many hard points did they win this weekend? Let me check real quick.
Um,
They didn't win. They went, I believe,
They
They
won.
went 2-2 in hard points this weekend.
Yeah, they won one against Paris, lost one against Paris, and then yeah, same with Minnesota. They won one against Minnesota, lost one against Minnesota, and I don't remember which ones are which. I think they won the first one in both of them. I think
They won the first one against Paris, the second one against
second one against
Minnesota. The one
Minnesota.
they won against Minnesota was 250 to 249, so
No, it was a.
incredibly close there.
Oh yeah, I remember that
That
one.
one was absurd. The one
Yeah,
they lost to Minnesota, they lost by 30. The one they lost to Paris, they lost by 90, and the one they won against Paris, they won by 80. So
yeah,
uh,
and
it's gonna be it's gonna be very interesting to see how this team evolves and how they change because they certainly do need some type of change in how they're playing the game. And I think one of the other reasons that Seattle did so poorly this weekend was apathy had a very, very off event. That probably is somewhat due to having a baby and probably having to spend a lot of time, obviously, with his wife and taking care of the kid. Uh,
yeah, a lot less COD time for sure.
so definitely had to split up his time a bit there. And honestly, if I was the coach, as much like I would talk to Apathy about the situation because I think it's a very important situation and a very complex situation that he is in. Having a kid during this quarantine and also still needing to play at a professional level in an online league. Like,
Oh
do you
yeah,
just you want to talk to him and be like, hey, can you handle this? Or if like you don't think you're gonna have enough time to give us the best opportunity to win, do we just call up Enable?
I think that's a valid point for sure. I think that both Karma and Apathy are in situations where they have kids, they have a wife, they're at home all the time, and that's got to be hampering to their lifestyle, and maybe they haven't really figured it out. Maybe there's a lot of questions that go into it, especially with everything that's going through. You see these teams like Chicago who have esports facilities and they have a place that you like can go to work, quote unquote. That's something that Karma's had for a long time, and now that he doesn't have it, maybe that's also kind of hampering to him. So there's a lot of factors that go into it, and I do think that you put together a bunch of vets on one team, it's never going to work. I think that they should have some younger blood in there. Maybe they can talk to Toronto, get some trades going. But it's one of those things that I'm just kind of I'm not over Seattle quite yet. I don't think it's over yet for Seattle, but they have to make some serious changes still.
Yeah, it's definitely getting to the point of the season where it's nearing crunch time.
Yeah, I'm hoping that Roster Mania will when is Roster Mania? I don't even know
The
if that's
halfway point.
it should be the halfway point, but I don't even know with all of the stuff that's going on if they're gonna change the dates on any of that or the halfway point would be
They're gonna have
it
to
would be
change the
after
dates, I would
it, it
imagine.
would be after Chicago, I believe. So I imagine Roster Mania is around the corner, and that would be an excellent time to start reevaluating, everybody's positions. I think that trading Enable would be a good idea. Hopefully you can pick up a couple good young players to try and fill his position, pull some players from challengers because those guys are probably hungry and ready to play. And I think that this is a great time and opportunity to pick up guys from challengers because it's all online anyway, and most of those guys are used to playing online. So
Yep,
this is a
plenty of good talent in challengers.
and that's the thing is that this is a perfect time to transition players in because you aren't saying, all right, hey, by the way, this is the main stage. You're gonna be on camera. A lot of these guys are like used to playing online at their setups at home or
They
whatever.
probably also
So
don't have to relocate
yes,
right
so
now.
well, unless you go to like Chicago or something like that, and then it's probably like you go to one of these legit teams, Atlanta, Dallas, Chicago, even Minnesota, where they have the workings of their own facility. There's a reason why these teams with their own workplaces and everything do well. It's because they're able to develop that chemistry.
Toronto has their own facility.
Toronto has their own facility, but they also have 10 guys, and they need to cut down to 7, in my eyes.
All right. I think we spent enough time on this point, though. So I'm going to move it along since we're still in our regular group matches, our first group matches.
Oh yeah,
I'm going to move
well,
on
shit.
to Chicago versus Minnesota, which I was the only one that got this right. I did think it was going to be a 3-2. It was a 3-0. However, it was probably one of the closest 3-0s you'll ever see.
It was really
And
close
so,
3-0. No, I mean you're not wrong.
I mean, yeah, it was 250 to 239 hard point. It was 6-5 S&D, and then it was 150 to 143 domination.
Yeah, no,
Like, how much closer can you get? You could do 250 to 249 and 150 to 149. But I mean, at that point, like if that happened to me, I honestly don't know what I would do. I would feel so crushed and devastated that I lost every single map by 1 point. Like,
I'm
oh, geez.
I am not my opinions on either team don't change from this result. I think they played three very good games against each other, and sometimes it's just the better team wins. And really, at the end of the day, when you have these top tier teams, that's what happens. Sometimes the better team wins. Sometimes the better team just gets a 3-0. But Chicago was nowhere to be found in the finals, and Minnesota was in the finals. So
Yeah.
just like I said, any team can beat any team any given day, and this was just Chicago's time to beat Minnesota.
Yep, definitely a good Friday for Chicago. And I think teams may want to take a look at Chicago's win record on some of their S&Ds. Yes, they only have 4 losses, 2 of which are on Piccadilly, 2-2 on that, but they're 4-0 on St. Petrograd.
Yeah, and their Arklov, like I said before, is unbelievable. I mean, aside
Yeah.
from aside from crazy envoy nades, um, their their Arklov is very very
Their
solid.
Arclov's also really good. They're 3-1 on Arclov. Their only loss was to Dallas in the first match they played. However, they're undefeated on it since. And the round counts on the St. Petrograd and on Arclov for when they've won it are pretty ludicrous.
Yeah,
Their Arclov, they're 18-9 on that in round count. And then on Petrograd, they're 24-14.
yeah,
So pretty
no,
much on average, teams are only getting like 3 rounds on them in search and destroy on those maps.
yeah, and I think it's important to note that Chicago's probably strong point at this point is their search and destroy, which is really really funny to me because in the beginning of the season they were like, all right, we really need to work on our search and destroy, and it's very clear that they have worked on it really hard, and now they're a force to be reckoned with on every single game mode.
Yeah,
Not
the
not just
worrying
not just
thing I
respawn.
think is their trend in hardpoint where they're moving towards a 50-50 kind of percentage in that. Currently they're 13-7 in hardpoint after starting off 6-0 in that mode. And Hackney Yard has definitely been their kryptonite in the hard points. They're 1-3 on Hackney Yard. And their strong points have definitely been their search and destroy and their domination. And so if they pick up their hard point again, bring that win to loss record up a bit, you're definitely going to reclaim, I would say, their spot in the top two.
I think it's really interesting that you bring up Hackney as well because Hackney has gone from a very linear, all right, this is how you play Hackney, to a very diverse, complicated map where there's really not very many wrong ways to play Hackney. And now there's not one but two very powerful points on Hackney being P2 and P4. And now people are saying that P4 is even harder to break than P2, which I've definitely started to see it now. I think that the spawns have been tweaked just a little bit to make it a little bit more fair for both teams. But it's one of those things the that Hackney has definitely gotten a lot more complicated as time goes on. So it's pretty
Yeah.
understandable that Chicago is going to start dropping those a little bit because they play in a very they don't improvise that much in hardpoint. It's very rote. They rotate at around the same time. They break the same way. If you watch film at all, like you're gonna see how Chicago plays hardpoint, and I think that's
Yeah.
probably one of their banes is the fact that they do make a lot of content, and a lot of people can pick up the fact that Chicago plays it a specific way. So that's probably the
And
reason why the
that
hardpoint's
that
getting
may be
worse.
why they struggle in these modes against some of these kind of wackier teams. You have Havoc that plays a very weird play style some of the times. You have the Australians on Paris too. That so it
Australians.
there's definitely something to that in kind of the structure and their need to definitely start adapting kind of mid map in these hard points.
Plus,
Uh,
Warzone came out, so you
yeah,
know
Warzone came out, but I
they
think all the pros have been playing Warzone, so I don't want to put that on them too much.
well they also have to stream Warzone, so like that's the whole content creation deal. Is not only do they have to play in their scrims, they also have to stream and make content, and they have to stream and make content for Warzone, and they have to stream and make content for the regular life stuff. They're still making content at Texas, so it's one of those things that it really hasn't stopped for Chicago, and it's just nice because I think as time goes on during this quarantine, people are going to start like the mental health side of things is going to kick in a lot more. We've seen that with Florida and Pristini, but it's something that they haven't really lost their routine, their daily routine, because they have such a strict routine with Chicago. Doesn't seem like it. Seems like they just gotta have fun all the time, but it's pretty serious down there.
Moving on to our next one, though, since we do want to keep this moving on, it was Toronto versus Dallas, since Toronto did beat Florida in the earlier matchup, and this one went to Dallas 3-2. So again, another incredibly close series with Toronto. They just can't seem to win these game fives, which is very unfortunate for them. However, somewhat to be expected when going up against the likes of Dallas. So we've talked about these teams a bunch, and so I don't really want to dig into it again too much. So I'll just leave you to kind of state what you want to say, and then we'll move on to our next Group B winners.
I've got nothing for this. This does kind of put Toronto a little bit higher in my eyes. That they are going to game fives against some better teams. I mean, they went to a game five against Florida, and then they went to a game five against Dallas, and then when they replayed Florida later on, they didn't go to a game five, but Florida was also kind of hot. So in my eyes, Toronto is a little bit better than what I may have power ranked them last week, but I still don't think they're that good. So
Yeah, I mean, I think most of our power ranks are pretty accurate. At the end, I just abolished my F tier and bumped them up into D tier with a bunch of other teams. And I think right now that's looking pretty accurate outside of, I guess, maybe Florida. Maybe I need to move Florida up a tier
maybe,
into, yeah, probably should move them up a tier
maybe
into B or C, maybe B.
I will
I don't
say
know. It's just, I don't want to, while Florida has definitely looked good, especially at this event, and they have beaten Chicago twice now.
yes.
Chicago is a team that has made it to a finals or a semifinals at every event they have played at. Florida, you cannot say the same.
Yeah, and I think that's fair. So if I had to make one change to my power rankings, it would be bumping Florida up into that like B tier territory because they have performed really really well. But I'm not opposed to either of our power rankings at this point, and I can see arguments being made for either of ours. Josh is on the other hand, Salvation Elites. Oh man, uh,
Yeah, didn't he have Florida as
the worst
the
team, or second worst team.
second worst team? Yeah, those were his two teams in F tier, weren't they?
Yeah, I flamed him on it in his own server,
Yeah,
added him and
that's
everything.
gonna be a bit of a yikes after this one. Luckily, I mean, we could have lied. There's no proof. We don't have his voice saying that's what he ranked them. So
That's
by all
true.
means, he could be like, "Nah, man, it's some bullcrap. I didn't say that."
Nah,
But
he's a really cool dude, and I'm really glad he was on here. I really wish he would do another one, but that's
yeah,
fine.
maybe we'll catch him. Maybe we'll catch him another time.
Another time, some
But
other
you know,
time.
we are gonna catch this next series that we're gonna talk about, which is gonna be Florida. Actually, no, not Florida. I'm getting ahead of myself. It was Paris versus Chicago, since Paris did beat Seattle. None of us had this matchup. However, I believe all of us had the team that wins the Chicago versus Minnesota matchup coming out of this one. So we were correct there. And this one was a 3-1 for Chicago. Relatively comfortable, I would say. None of the maps were, well, the hard points were relatively close. Actually, very close, I would say,
Yes.
only being a 20-point differential. The domination was the one thing that was heavily in the Chicago Huntsmen's favor. That, to me, is to be expected. The Chicago Huntsmen are, I believe, 9-3 in Domination, yes, they are 9-3 in domination. So very strong map mode for them. While the Paris Legion, they're pretty much 50-50 across most modes. They're 11-11 in hardpoint. They're 6-6 in domination. And the one game mode where they do have a winning record is that Search and Destroy, where they're currently at a 9-7. And so this is another thing about maybe if you're like with teams adapting to play Paris. Going into this weekend, Paris was undefeated on Gunrunner domination. They were 5-0, and the two times they played it this weekend, they lost by relatively significant margins as well. So
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure
this is
what
kind
that
of where
means.
I'm worried about Paris starting to drop down the standings as teams adapt to the play style maybe that they brought over from all their preseason scrims in Europe, as well as not Dens, excuse me, the other Aussie. Shocks did not look good this weekend at all. And I don't know if that's them moving to online, and I hope it's not. So in the coming weeks, I do hope that we see some better play and performance out of him individually.
Yeah, I agree. Shocks definitely costed Paris. I would argue a winnable series against Chicago minus the domination. I think what was really going on there was Paris just they folded so many times, and they go into a position, they'd have the rotation, and then they would just not win the one gunfight that they needed to win. It was a lot of just like 2v1s they didn't clean up, or trades that they just didn't pick up, and I think a lot of that does come down to communicating and working a little bit faster. And I think that Paris was just slower than Chicago a lot of times. It's not always a bad thing to play a little bit slower, but in hardpoint and situations like that, you're gonna kind of feel the pain whenever you aren't moving as fast as the other team.
Yeah. And speaking of Chicago, I can't believe that we forgot to mention this. In that Chicago Minnesota series, Chicago full sailed Minnesota in the S&D.
Oh yeah, that was oh my
They were
gosh,
down 0-5 in the search, and then they did a full sail,
that was
and they brought it back and they won it. That
uh,
was
uh,
absolutely crazy and absurd. And the round 11 that they won, they ninja diffused. So the
yeah, that
cojones
was.
on Envoy to kind of just take that series over was absolutely absurd and a pleasure to watch as a spectator.
That's honestly, if I was gonna use one word to describe this tournament, it was momentum. Momentum played such a huge part in Chicago's playing against Minnesota. It was massive. It was probably everything for Florida. When they took that tough loss against Toronto, I think they kind of took it to heart and then went off with it. But yeah, I think momentum means a lot in Call of Duty in general. But this tournament especially, it seemed like whoever had just more gas behind them was going to the top. I think that after if Chicago had played their third game on Saturday, which you wouldn't because they were in semifinals already, if they played their third game on Saturday, Chicago would probably have been in the finals. But I think the momentum was kind of lost going into that, and I think that because of that, our winners bracket was kind of affected as far as going to the 3 day scheme
Yeah,
instead of
it's
the 2 days.
definitely different for the winners playing just one series a day up until I guess the semifinals. You win your group A, you're done for that day. You win it again the next day, you're done for that day. And so it was just one match a day for Chicago. And since they did lose and I guess for Dallas as well, since both of them lost in the semifinals.
Yeah, and
Maybe the key here is to lose your Group A
throw,
or your Group B winners round one, or maybe you lose your first match. Who knows?
throw. That's what you need to do. You need to throw. No, but I mean, look at it. Everybody who won their day one did not make it super far. Besides, like the semifinal. I mean, semifinals is far, right? But both teams that went to the semifinals lost, and it's because they played one game a day. And with that, and I'm sure you can attest to this a little bit. I know that's a little different for online, but with that, you have to think about all the preparation that goes into, getting ready to play your first game. that's hours of warm up, scrims with specific players and everything. Coaching strategies, like getting in that zone. It's a lot easier once you're already in that zone to keep playing at that level, momentum. So I think that this 3 day event is really going to start messing with people, and I think this is a testament as to why this tournament was a little bit weirder. And you can see that by the end result that the teams that lost the first day and got a lot of their playing time in on day two were a lot more successful. So
Yep. Both Florida and Minnesota lost their first match in group, so they had to play two losers matches. They won both of them, and then they went all the way up to the finals. So, yeah, maybe there's definitely some truth to that pudding. But moving on to our next series, it was Seattle versus the Minnesota Rocker. Unfortunately, we had three ways of getting a Seattle versus Chicago matchup. We saw none of them, so none of us got that prediction right. But those of us that said that either Minnesota or Chicago was going to be playing in this losers group B match, we both said that that higher, I guess, seeded team that you would say Minnesota or Chicago would win. And that is what happened. Minnesota beat Seattle. It was a game 5, so pretty relatively close series, you could say there, especially across all the respawn game modes, and even more so in the domination in that
yeah,
fifth hard point, since they had to replay the Gunrunner Dom since it was a tie. So the hard point wasn't the fourth map this time around; it was the fifth one. So
how many times has that
crazy
happened?
circumstances there.
How
A
many?
tie in domination. That's the first time it's happened this season, and I think even more, even crazier is a tie in hardpoint, which I think we've only seen twice.
Yeah, no, this series was insane. But as soon as it went to the and I say this, with little air quotes, as soon as it went to the game 5, into the search, we kind of all knew it was over. Like there was no saying, oh yeah, maybe Seattle's gonna beat Minnesota, one of the best search
It
teams in the
was
league.
their best search and destroy map. It was St. Petrograd, and it was against Minnesota, who they do have at least one S&D win against. However, Minnesota definitely, I would still say overall, is the much better search destroy team,
Much
and they
better.
certainly showed it in that game 6 S&D.
Game 6. Oh man, this is such a wacky event. I swear, y- like people talk so much smack on this online event, but this was so much fun to watch. It's probably the most fun I've had watching a tournament this whole season, actually. And that might be a little weird, but I think I had more fun watching this online series than I have in a very, very long time playing Call of Duty. So I'm very excited to see the Chicago event this weekend and see what's in store for us. But yeah, I mean, this Seattle team, I have it'd be beating a dead horse if I just said they need to improve their surge game some more.
Yeah.
Like it really would be.
So we won't beat the dead horse. It's already dead.
It's
We'll
already
just
dead.
move on to our Group A Losers Round 2 match, where we saw a rematch of our first Group A match, which is, again, Toronto versus Florida Mutineers. None of us had this matchup. We actually all had Florida losing this matchup when we thought their opponent was going to be the LA Gorillas, because I hopped on the bandwagon and I should have just jumped off of that real quick. And Florida took the rematch. Florida build momentum. They won their series against the LA Gorillas 3-1. They won this one 3-1. Florida looking good going into Sunday, and I don't really have anything else to say. We've talked about Florida, we've talked about Toronto, and so I'm ready to move on to our Group B Losers Round 2 matchup, where we saw Minnesota versus Paris. Again, none of us guessed this. This was literally our worst predictions ever. But I do think if we saw this matchup, we all would have guessed that Minnesota would come out on top, which they did in 3-1 fashion.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You got to think that. I mean, this is Saturday Paris we're talking about. So that Paris lost both of their games on Saturday, and yeah, saw a quick exit from the tournament after that. But Minnesota they've been a constant performer, like a very, very consistent performer. Even in the Chicago Minnesota matchup that they had early on in the Group B stage, very first stage, they had a very close series, even though it was a 3-0. They started to get a little bit of confidence in themselves, took over Seattle, played a lot of Call of Duty against Seattle, won that in a 2-3 and 1 fashion. And then writing was kind of on the wall at that point. Paris was pretty much humiliated by Chicago especially after that Dom. And coming into this Group B losers bracket against Minnesota, it was pretty clear that we were gonna see Minnesota come out on top.
And the one game mode that Paris was able to take was the Search and Destroy. They took it 6-5 over Minnesota. And that seems to definitely be Minnesota's worst game mode. They're currently 7-14 in S&D. So gonna need to pick that up definitely if they want to break through into that A tier
I agree.
and
I
maybe even improve their domination a little bit as their dom is currently at a 9-7. So a winning record still, but you're
I
going to need it to be just that much better if you want to be considered an A tier team.
Yeah, you have to be good at searching hardpoint to be an A tier team. Like your third map, whatever. Like if you hadn't won a single domination this entire year and your search and destroy and hardpoint were among the best, I would consider you an A tier team because you play those twice.
Yep.
But
And they've certainly been putting in the repetitions on hardpoint. They currently have played the most hardpoints out of any team in the league at 29.
yeah,
And they are currently 19-10 in that mode.
Yeah, and their hard point is fantastic because they are such a fundamentally sound team. They move as a unit. They play really really well together. Unprecedented chemistry in my eyes because you hear these names and you don't really associate them too much with any other previous organization aside from like some duos or anything. But their chemistry has been probably the second best behind phases. And I think that speaks volumes for Minnesota and why I'm still really high on Minnesota. This event wasn't anything that was like, oh, in spite of this event, Minnesota's still good because they made it to the finals. So,
Moving on to their road to the finals, actually, with their semifinal match against Dallas. I did get this team prediction correct. However, I got the team winning it incorrect. I said Dallas was going to win it 3-2. However, Minnesota came away with the W in a 3-1 fashion over Dallas. And Dallas is a good team. However, this event, they definitely struggled overall. Their two rookies definitely showed up in online play. Hook gave us a consistent performance. Crimsix looked like how Crimsix has looked throughout the season, which has been relatively decent. The one that struggled was their star player throughout the whole season, which was Clayster. Clayster did the worst on this team. He had a .86 KD, which is not anything bad. However, the team definitely needed him more around a 1.0 if they wanted to walk away with a W this event.
yeah,
And so
it's bad for a main
hopefully,
AR for sure. A main AR who's
yeah,
been pulling like a 1.1 to a 1.2 the
yeah,
whole
that might
season.
be the worst KD from a main AR at this event, actually.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
and
it is. It is. It is the lowest KD from a main AR at this event, and so that's definitely. I'm maybe not concerning. That might be just. I don't know if Dallas switched up their play style a little bit or something, but
uh,
I
I
don't think we're going to see a repeat performance of that going into. I don't think they're at Chicago.
no
They are at
no they
Chicago,
are
so
just
I don't think
Chicago.
we'll see a repeat of that at Chicago. I don't think we'll see a repeat.
No, what's gonna happen is Clayster's gonna pick up like a kilo or something and just go off with it, and then everybody in pubs is gonna start running the kilo because Clayster made it work
Hey, I've
somehow.
heard you don't have to reload. You got 100 bullets in the mag. Are you allowed to run the whole 100 bullet mag
Yeah,
thing?
it's not
Okay.
G8 or anything. I don't know why he would, but Clayster probably would. Go Clay. You know how it goes. You see always like I can't tell you how many times I've watched Clay in a tournament and he's running something real wonky and then like why are you doing that, dude? And then all of a sudden everybody in pubs is running what Clay's running because he figured it out. So this tournament was not the case though. He was running a very standard set and he's just getting bodied, honestly. I plain and simple. He's just getting bodied. Yeah, I agree that it was mostly Clay's fault. Crim Six was also not the best. Ilian Shotzi did all right. Hook was pretty lights out, but yeah,
Yeah,
this was like all things considered. Even though they did make it to a semifinals, this was not a good event for Dallas. They got the points, and that's all that matters, and they can put this behind them. But that's what they
yeah,
need to be doing. They don't need to focus on this event too much.
yeah. Even if series are close, all that matters is that they came away with at least two W's, so that does net them 20 points and does keep them towards the top of the leaderboard overall for the season. However, they definitely need to look at some of their gameplay and fix some of the mistakes they made during this event. And speaking of another team that needs to look at their gameplay and fix some of their mistakes, at least against this Florida Mutineers matchup, is the Chicago Huntsmen, who went up against the Mutineers in the semifinals, and once again they lost. The Florida Mutineers took it 3-1 over the Huntsmen, and the Hackney Dom was a blowout. The Azir Hardpoint was relatively close. Honestly, that's potentially one the Chicago Huntsmen could have and should have won if it wasn't for some out of the Florida Mutineers. And the Piccadilly Search and Destroy, Florida Mutineers took that 6-4. So that one was relatively close as well. However, the Huntsmen have looked lights out in Search and Destroy, and the Mutineers had not. I believe they had literally just broken their 7-game losing streak in S&D when they played Toronto just the day prior. So,
Yeah, I think that's important to note is that the search game was so bad, and yet they floored like they didn't body Chicago, but they floored them for sure. I think that the biggest takeaway from the semifinal was that we finally definitively said that Florida is like their win against Chicago was not like an emotion driven thing, between brothers, and it was a very like it was a very toss up match because there was a lot of other factors that go into it. There was no such thing going into this one. Persini did not play in this event, and Pharaoh just stepped up, and Mox, oh my God, Mox was on fire the whole event. Like he was just lights out. I know that he's been really inconsistent throughout this year, but Mox really really stepped it up, and I think that was a key point to them winning was Mox really like accepting the flex role, moving forward with it, and he did really really well. So proud of the
yeah,
Mutineers, proud
he
of the
did
boys.
he did relatively well, I would say. In KD, he was at a 1.3 overall. His hard point still quite questionable at times. I would say his engagements per 10 minutes was the lowest on the team, as well as his true engagement success was the lowest on the team. And so he was definitely kind of one of, if you're looking at Easy Max stats, he's definitely kind of one of the only players with a bunch of red across the board. And so while he did definitely improve, and that's good, a very good look for him and his adoption of that flex role, there is still some room for improvement for him, which is a good thing for the Mutineers, I would say. If they were able to win this event and there's still things that they can prove on statistically as a team in shaping a more well balanced 5-man squad, then that can only be good for them. However, I do want to point out that as well, this event, not only did you have Skies going off at a 1.3 overall, you also had
Beast.
Pharaoh going off at a 1.24. And the lowest KD on the team overall was Frosty at a 0.99. When the lowest KD on your team is a 0.99 and you got two players that are above like a
A 1-2, yeah,
1.2, there's no way you're losing the event.
yeah. No,
There's no way
this
at all.
this
They
event,
destroyed this event in the latter half.
I will say that Pharaoh kind of was. I think he had a chip on his shoulder this event. There was a lot of teams that blackballed him in the beginning, said, "Oh well, he doesn't deserve a place in CDL." Florida gave him a chance, and he ran with it. And I think that that's probably the best thing Pharaoh could have done at this point. And I am just looking at 11 other sorry organizations right now that saw this guy playing Call of Duty, still on his grind, still trying to stay warm in the event somebody does pick him up, and they said, nah. Because now you had a 1-2-4, won a finals, and is probably on one of the best teams in CDL at this point. Whenever Pristini comes back, I really do feel like it's over. Like I really do feel like Florida's going to be one of the top tier teams in the league.
Yeah, and at this point, I don't even know if they really need to bring Pristini back. if they were able to do this well, obviously maybe if they start struggling or something, but it seems like they found out a way to get this roster to work. And maybe there's a specific reason they took Pristini out. Sometimes players just don't fit into rosters how you think they would.
No,
And I'm not saying that's the case here. It potentially may be, but it will be very interesting to see. And if they continue to have success like this, I don't see a scenario where Pristini comes back into play for them unless maybe they actually figure out a way to make a really efficient 6-man roster where they're subbing Pristini in when they need that aggressive sub player on maps, and they're subbing out one of the other pieces. I don't know who it would be. Maybe it's Mox, maybe it's Havoc. I don't know at this point for specific maps and for specific modes. And so maybe that's the route they go if they do decide that that's the best fit for the team. But it will be very kind of interesting to see moving into potentially a roster mania in the next month or so if Pristini moves off of that roster or if he moves back into the starting lineup.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's yeah, there is a question that needs to be raised. Is Pristini going to be coming back to Florida, and are they going to be satisfied with a roster that they have without him? It's hard to tell. I mean, Pristini was doing so well for them early on, and he had to unfortunately take a mental health break because I mean, I totally get it, and maybe he's still not 100%, and they can wait on him, but
I mean, he's ready to play.
yeah, I think that he's ready to play too, but I think this was a good call to have him sit another event and watch his team go and do really good things. So we'll see what happens with Pristini. He could very easily get traded. I could see that happening because there's a lot of teams that would benefit greatly from a guy like Pristini. I did write about it a little bit ago. I wrote about 4 teams that would benefit from Pristini if he decides to leave: New York, LA Gorillas, Optic, and Seattle. But maybe we'll cover that later whenever Roster Mania is about to take off. Maybe after Chicago.
Maybe after Chicago or whenever roster mania
Yeah,
does
I think
occur.
I think it's after Chicago. That's like the halfway
Okay.
point, right? I'm not sure. Like I said,
I am
everything's out
not
the window at
sure.
this point.
I don't know. What's not out the window though was our grand finals. That was the Florida Mutineers versus the Minnesota Rocker. And the first hard point was incredibly close, and the rest of the series not at all.
Yeah,
First hard point went to the Minnesota Rocker, 250 to 241, excuse me. And after that, Florida Mutineers just ran away with it. It was a 6-2 Piccadilly S&D. It was a 194 to 117 St. Petro domination, and then it was a 250 to 115 Gunrunner hard point. So
I'm really
very, very crazy finals there. Congratulations to the Mutineers. And this is very interesting because we saw the Rocker demolish the Atlanta FaZe twice on
yes.
Piccadilly Search.
Yeah,
However, they have lost the map every single time they have not played against the Atlanta FaZe. They are currently 2-3 on Piccadilly Search. Can they only beat Atlanta FaZe on that map? Like, this proves just how much of a hard counter the Rocker are to kind of what Atlanta FaZe and their play want to do and their play style. It's just absurd.
well, I also think
And
it's important that you do bring up Atlanta FaZe and how they play pick search because it is a very 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 like slow played map. That's the reason why a lot of players don't like to play it because you do have to play a lot slower. It's about getting that pick. It's about setting up for your sniper. And while Simp is unbelievable, I've seen him do magic on Piccadilly. The rest of the team just doesn't seem to like quite get that, and they're still slide canceling around and just generally being cracked out of their minds, as they normally like. That's their standard mode of operation.
yeah, I mean, Atlanta FaZe, they're 2-2 on Piccadilly Search. Their round count when they're winning is 12-3.
Yes.
And when they're losing, which are their 2 losses to the Rocker, is 4-12. So the Rocker are 12-4 round count. So it's just like what it's clearly just when they play the Rocker on that map, they cannot do what they normally do.
Yeah, I mean the old tiny terrors in Atlanta, they can't figure it out quite yet about Minnesota, but maybe who knows? With everything kind of being out the window already, I'm curious to see how Atlanta is going to be doing during the shift to online. I'm sure that they're still going to be a phenomenal team and things should be better, but after this event, everything's kind of out the window at this point. There's a lot that's changed, and if you're just picking this back up and you're trying to figure out, what's going on in CDL, now's a great time because it's about as where it was in the beginning of the season. We really haven't seen anything change since then, as far as like, or sorry, we've seen a lot change since then because it's basically like there's new teams again. Online makes that much of a difference for sure.
One more thing I want to talk about on the Minnesota Rockers, since I feel like we've talked about kind of Florida enough, and I do just want to touch on this a little bit, is the Rockers hard point. I remember I said they are currently 19-10 in that. Of that, if you are playing Rocker, please, oh please, you need to ban Hackney Yard. They're 6-1 on Hackney Yard, and their one loss was to Seattle, where they lost 250 to 249. They've only lost Hackney Yard by 1 point.
And that's the thing about being a good, like a fundamentally sound hardpoint team, and I think that
Yeah, you
Minnesota
need
has
to play
that for
them.
sure.
You need to play them on Gunrunner or Ramasta potentially. Gunrunner, they're 2-4, 2-4. So that's by far their worst hardpoint. Azir Cave, they're 6-2 currently. Petro, they're 2-1. So that one's still a bit up in the air. And Ramaz, they're 3-2. So
Nobody likes playing Petro
you're
hardpoint.
100% gonna want to play them on Gunrunner. 100%.
Yeah,
So just make sure, just ban Hackney.
I think
That's all I'm gonna say.
I think Gunrunner falls under the same category as R-Claw, where it's like the fan favorite, and you're either like okay at it
I don't
or
even
you're
know
really
why
good at
it's
it.
the fan favorite though. Like these hardpoint maps to me are so unbalanced for sides. They're so unbalanced for sides.
Yeah,
It's
I agree.
damn near impossible to break the flip, like the spawn, like the spawn hard point, like where the teams are spawning when they spawn into the map for the first hard point, and like where the hard point is located around that location. It's pretty much impossible. And like look at Gunrunner. You have one in the center, you have one in like this crates area, and then you have the one back in the warehouse. So those
Isn't
are
that
the
cool?
two that are like on that spawn side, and then the other one you have it minecarts and another back shack. And so
Yeah, it's a lot of running
like
back and forth for
the
sure.
one that yeah, but so the middle one is 100% a 50-50 hard point, and then you have the one that's close to the center hard point. That one's got to be a 50-50. It's so much closer to the middle of the map than than the other one is on the other side. That's the one that's supposedly supposed to be close to the middle of the map. It's already pretty far back into the spawn, and so I think another map that you definitely have to look at. Oh, which one is it? I believe it's St. Petrograd. Literally, three of the hard points are on one side of the map.
Yeah, I agree.
Like what? How these maps are clearly like this could be a whole separate discussion, so I won't get into it. But some of these maps, they just made them for no game mode whatsoever, just straight up TDM, and then they just threw hard points and dominations in there, and they didn't put like any thought process behind it at all, outside of just trying to make a normal like. It's just
Well, I will also say that the spawns are still really broken. I mean, you see a lot of videos out there, even on Gunrunner, where if you're going from P2 to P3, it will just spawn you in the middle of like little crates area, and you aren't protected by anything. So if somebody's
they're probably spawning you there because that's probably a TDM spawn, and they didn't
yeah,
put any thought process into making the the maps actually play for any other game mode, and they probably didn't do any other programming stuff for it outside of like the complaints that they got. So they're like, just do this and this, tweak this and this. Like they're literally probably just using TDM spawns. No joke.
yeah, I know
So
you're excited for Black Ops
I'm
5
not.
too.
I'm
So
not. Yeah, yeah. Please just give me a different game at this point.
yeah, I'm not quite there, and I'm actually starting to enjoy the game a little bit more.
Yeah, it's called Stockholm syndrome.
Moving on to the Chicago event.
Yeah, that's a conversation we'll have another time. Hopefully, when we get Salvation's Elite back on. But yeah, we'll talk about the Chicago event now. I see you're already putting in some predictions. I'm most likely going to agree with most of those. The first matchup, Group A, is Atlanta versus. Did I say Atlanta? Yes, Atlanta versus London. So this is the first time we're going to see London. They might have Shawnee. They might have Nasty. Who knows? Either way, London has looked pretty decent so far in what I've been hearing from online skids, but they're looking at Shawnee. However, Atlanta's just too
Atlanta.
good of a team for me to really go any other way in this matchup. So, I'm going to agree with you 3-1 for Atlanta over the London Royal Ravens. And our other Group A matchup is the Chicago Huntsmen versus the New York Subliners. We haven't seen the New York Subliners for a long time, so I'm going to say 3-1 and not a 3-0 simply because I'm still giving it to Chicago, so it's not like I'm going the complete other way. And it doesn't even matter, I guess, if I say 3-1 or 3-0. I'm just going to give it to them since I think they probably have, like, they've had to have improved. We haven't seen them for a month, and they've been able to practice with Mac, who's been really good. They practiced also with Sensor, and so they've had time, but they had good scrim results, at least what they've been posting. Maybe they've only been posting the good results, so who knows? But I'm definitely going to give it to Chicago. However, I'm going to give New York just that one map.
Yeah,
And
yeah. I don't have anything else to say about that. That's
yeah, so I'll
teamwork.
move on to more interesting matchups, I guess. At least you're saying they're going to be quite interesting. And so our Group B matchup, our first one is going to be Dallas versus Optic Gaming LA. Haven't seen Optic Gaming LA in a while. Dashy is apparently playing with the roster again. Don't know what the sub break with
I don't
him out for
know.
Chino was. Who knows? Who knows
No
what's
one,
going on?
nobody knows.
It's just madness out here. But yeah,
Uh,
this one could definitely be a 3-2. I definitely could see that happening, especially with the poor look we saw from Dallas at their home event. However, I think definitely they're gonna come away from that event improved as a team. So I'm going to say 3-1 for Dallas over this Optic Gaming squad. We haven't seen Optic Gaming for a long time. So who knows how much they've improved. However, with it moving to online, a lot of the players on that team are going to be, I mean, at the beginning of the game, they complained about the game nonstop. Now that it's moving to online, I imagine they're probably in that same super just negative mindset about life. So maybe we see them revert back to one of their earlier states, and we don't see that Optic Gaming that we saw at the Los Angeles homestand, at least for a bit until they've learned to accept their fate that it's going to be an online league.
yeah, I definitely agree. I it's hard to say what's going on, but Optic has not been performing the way Optic has been previously. I mean, there's also a lot that has changed and so many other factors that go into it. But it seems like they're starting to get things back together, and then you have this weird Chino Dashy thing go on, and all of this like roster rumor stuff, and trade rumors and all this stuff, et cetera, that usually happens whenever something unexpected and not intuitive works. And I don't know. It's really hard to tell what Optic's doing right now. It's really easy to tell what Dallas is doing right now, and it's winning games that should be very very winnable. And I think that I think that Dallas is going to come over top of Optic pretty easily. I think 3-2 is maybe a little bit harder on Dallas than they deserve, but I'm still going to give the win to Dallas.
Yeah, no, I think it could definitely be fair if we see the same optic that we saw at that Los Angeles event. I mean, they went from being what, like 2-5 in, yeah, I believe 2-5 in hardpoint to now 5-6. They went from being 1-5 in S&D now to being 3-6. So they were definitely on the up and up at that LA event. I'm just afraid that maybe with this moving to the online league, we see them revert a bit. Moving on to our second Group B matchup, though, it is going to be the Seattle Surge versus the LA Gorillas. Once again, I'm going to go with my Seattle boys. I'm going to give it to them. I'm gonna probably be wrong once again.
whatever you
hoping not.
do, you can't say that it's a 3-2 in Seattle's favor because we know, both know that that's not
I
gonna
want to say
happen.
it, but you can't really say it any other way, right? Like
You know, you got to say like
it's
3-1.
3-1 is so risky though. It's so
If
risky. I
if
mean, Seattle haven't looked that good in or they've looked good in domination. They're 7-3 in dom, undefeated on Gunrunner, and then 50-50 on the other two maps. Their hard points though, they're 6-11. They're
yeah,
6-11 in their hard points. It's not been a good look. And they're 2-5 on Azir Cave. The only map they have a winning record on is Hackney Yard Hardpoint. So, and the points, the ones where they're losing, it's not even close to 250. They're like wavering around or below the 200 point mark in their hardpoint losses on average. So it's not even like they're that close to winning those. Gosh, this is, yeah, you really gotta like give it to the LA Gorillas.
I
But
think
I don't want to be tricked again. I feel like I was tricked the last event.
put 3-1 out at Seattle because it's not going to be 3-2 Seattle. You and I both know that Seattle is not going to win a search, a game 5 search against just about anybody.
Seattle has the record though. They have the record for losing the most round 11 search and destroys. They have gone to
They
5 round 11 search and destroys out of their 15 S&Ds, and they've lost 4 out of 5 of those round 11s.
they are choke artist supremes. I'm I'm gonna call them out for it. Like, stop choking. That's plain and simple. Just stop choking because you're choking on just about everything that you could possibly choke on. Round 11s, game 5s. When it matters, it's just like, the other team just
Hey, they won.
wants it more.
The one S&D they did win round 11 was against the
I
Gorillas.
mean, it could happen, but
They went to 2 round 11 S&Ds against the Gorillas. One
so
they lost, one they won.
so
But
if
both times they have played them in S&D, it's gone round 11. I'm giving it Seattle Surge 3-2. Let's go. Let's
all
go.
right, well, you know what? I can't argue with that
This is
logic.
the only spot we're differing so far. So, we got to get some discrepancy here. So one of
Yeah,
us
but
can
just
be
give him
right,
the
one of
three
us can be
one.
wrong.
Just give him the three
No,
one.
I'm giving it the
Oh
3-2.
my
It doesn't
god.
matter. Either way, I'm saying Seattle wins
All
it.
right, that's fine. That's fair. You know what? You
Our
want to
group
see them win, so I get it.
yes, our Group A winners round 1 is going to be Atlanta versus Chicago. I'm going to give this to Atlanta 3-2. We haven't seen Atlanta recently, at least not online. Chicago, we did see them. They looked really good in their first 2 matches, but on Sunday they just kind of collapsed. And Formal had a pretty off event for him, I would say. He
Yeah,
was
I would agree.
overall hovering at a .83.
Yeah.
So
No, it's
definitely an uncharacteristic performance from him during the event. He had one of the lowest true engagement success rates at only a 46.1. So
this was
definitely a bad performance from Formal this event. And I do believe they said there was a bit of a role swap between maybe him and Arcides on who is running the main AR. I think on some maps Formal is running the MP5, in which case maybe you want Arcides running that if Formal can, this kind of poor performance from him stays persistent throughout the upcoming events.
well, I will say that it has to do with, and this makes sense. It has to do with the fact that Formal's in California still, and his connection is not as good. And when you are an AR player, your connection is everything as far as
Wouldn't
online
it be
goes.
more so if you were an SMG because you're more in their face?
No, because you can miss more bullets as an SMG player. You have to hit your shots as an AR player, and that's why like your main ARs are just lights out and seem like they can cover so much of the map in LAN because they shoot straight. They 3 bullet people, and that's what needs to happen. But in online, if you have a bad connection or something and you don't pick it up properly, and you're 4 bulleting people or 5 bulleting people, then you're not going to win your gunfights as an AR player. And I think that's probably the big reason why Formal is probably switching to a flex for online. So, and it does make sense that Arcides is playing the AR spot too, because Arceus is a phenomenal AR player. I mean, he did
Oh
great
yeah,
in Black Ops
definitely.
4. He did a phenomenal. Well, okay, I won't even have to talk about that because who won champs last year? Oh, E United. Oh,
United.
Arceus was on a United and was playing out of his mind. I mean, Simp was
I
too,
feel
but
like I just thought it was kind of interesting because I've seen Arcity move away from the main AR role a bit more at times. I've seen him pick up maybe some more of those midway guns as kind of the MP5 is. So it just feels more normal in my eyes for Arcities to be that kind of flex MP5 when they need to run 4 SMGs on maps. But if it's something to do with Formal being in LA, then that kind of makes sense that they're moving him to that role specifically because of that.
yeah, I think that's what it is. That's what makes sense to me, and yeah, I do think that you have to change things up now that it's online. You'd be joking yourselves if you say that you were playing the same way as LAN. Ask Dallas. Ask Dallas if online's the same as LAN. So so yeah, I think that Atlanta's got that one though for sure.
Yeah, I would say so as well. Atlanta's just looked too good, even though they have lost to Minnesota, but that's the only team that they've lost to so far. So until I see them lose to some other teams, I'm going to give it to them 3-2 over Chicago. You as well. Moving on to our Group B winners round one predictions. This is where we differ. I have Dallas versus Seattle. You have Dallas versus the LA Gorillas. Both of us have Dallas coming away with the series. I say 3-2. I don't know. Dallas didn't look that great at the last one. It should be 3-1 for Dallas or a 3-0. Things are weird. I'm just gonna stay weird. I'm just gonna say 3-2. Dallas is still gonna win it, obviously,
Well, yeah,
but
goes to a Game 5 search against Seattle. Hmm. Hmm. It might go to
hmm,
round 11, but we also know that it's
just
also
keep
round 11
on
against
just keep
Seattle.
on adding up that record.
Yeah,
I mean, I need Seattle to win an S&D so they don't break Florida's losing streak on search. That's why I got them taking that win over the Gorillas.
oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah. Moving on to our Group
Wishful
A
thinking, got it.
losers. Yeah, moving on to our Group A losers round one match. I believe we both have the same thing. Yeah, it's going to be London versus New York. I'm going to say this is a 3-1 for London.
Yeah,
I think London's looked pretty good at the events we have seen them at. They've only played three. They played the same amount of events as New York, I do believe. They both have been at 3 events. And we haven't seen London for a long time, so they've had a lot of time to watch film, to get scrims in, and that can either benefit them or that can hurt them in the long run. Maybe players on the team got lackadaisical, who knows? So this is definitely going to be a very interesting matchup to watch, especially also with New York's changes coming in and the amount of time they've had to practice that. However, I do think this is going to go London's way as it has the 2 times that these teams have played.
yeah. I mean, I think that's fair. But I mean, you can't give it all credit to the fact that London hasn't played a while because New York also hasn't played for a long time, and I think that both of them are going to be pretty well prepped for this event. That's why I'm going to go with the 3-2 over London. I think that New York is going to start showing that they can play in the CDL, but this is not their time yet. Who knows? Like, honestly, who knows? Florida won last event, and nobody saw that one coming. So, I mean, maybe this is New York's time to shine. Maybe they'll make a semifinals run or something like that. But I don't see it.
Definitely it will be an interesting matchup to watch. Moving on to our Group B losers round one. We both have Optic Gaming LA here. However, you have them against Seattle. I have them here against the LA Gorillas. So a rematch of the Los Angeles teams. And last time, honestly, the Gorillas threw it away. They should have won. They should have won that series against Optic
Yeah,
Gaming.
they they threw for sure. They
So this
threw.
is gonna be a really interesting one. Do I want to buy into the Blast internet connection hype, which we did see? He did do amazing during the Dallas event. However, the other players on this team not so much. Or do I want to go with Old Faithful in Optic Gaming?
I mean, you could take a peek down at my Group B losers round two, and
Oh, yeah, there is that. Okay, Hmm. Interesting. 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 Yes.
So I have them in Group B losers round two, and I really do think that the Gorillas are going to take it over Optic because of the fact that they played last time and they probably felt like they choked it. And Optic is one of those teams. They're young and they get really complacent very quickly, as you can see in I don't know COD Champs Sunday. Not naming any names there, but maybe it was a little bit of a choke because of complacency. I'm still of the opinion that Optic is, by and large, and the pros will agree with me, the biggest tortures of of any team in the CDL right now. So who even knows if they're going to show up to play on time? I could see them just, getting penalties left and right, having to throw away a hard point or something because they didn't show up on time. Apparently TJ Haley is the biggest torture in the league, and he has no reason to other than he's probably stuffing his face with McDonald's or something. So
The maturity of the young players on the Optic Gaming roster is extremely concerning. However, I
I
am going to give them the W over the Gorillas in 3-2 fashion. I think on the side of the Gorillas, they just did not impress me enough for me to give them the W over this Optic Gaming team, even though the Optic Gaming roster has not looked good throughout pretty much this entire season outside of their matchup against Minnesota, and maybe one could even say their matchup against Dallas at that Los Angeles event. However, when you only got one player that's doing well on the Gorillas while the others are all barely above or even below a .8, I'm going to have to give it to this Optic Gaming team.
I mean that's also fair. I think either of these teams are different from where they started in the very beginning of the season, and it's online. I don't know how many times I'd say it. It's brand new. We have no idea how any of this is gonna go, and last tournament is very evident of that. So I think that calling Optic over LA Gorillas is also a distinct possibility.
Moving on to our Group A losers round two, it's going to be Chicago versus the London Royal Ravens for both of us. I am going to agree with you. I am going to say Chicago takes this over London. I do think that's like a reasonable assumption. Chicago is still a good team. They looked good in all of the series that they played outside of the one against Florida. And I do believe that Chicago is just a little bit better than London is currently. And if we see this game, I do think it's going to go to a game five, and in that game five, I do think Chicago is going to end up taking it over London since their search and destroy has looked like their best game mode so far throughout this season.
Yeah, I think Chicago's got it over to London. I think that there's a lot of question marks in London right now, in London's quarter right now, with the roster changes and visas and all of this other stuff that's going on because of the coronavirus. So there's obviously got to be a lot of outside stressors in London's corner right now. Chicago doesn't seem to have that, and they've been a pretty consistent performer. I will say though that it is London and they will win some games off of Chicago, and I think that this is a 3-2.
Yep, definitely. Moving on to our Group B losers round two, I have Chicago versus the Optic Gaming LA roster. You have the LA Gorillas versus Optic Gaming LA. And so this is Group B is honestly super weak. I don't know why Dallas got such an easy group at their home event, but Chicago has a pretty darn difficult group for their event. They got Atlanta, London, and then I guess New York, but they got Atlanta and London. While Dallas, they have the bottom three teams in the league. I think OGLA is the only one that has 20 points. Seattle, I believe Seattle might also have 20 points, but the Gorillas have one. I know that for a fact. So
Yes,
they have two 20-point teams and a 10-point team, while Dallas is at like 100,
100.
I think.
They're tied
So
with Florida and Minnesota for
I don't know why Chicago gave them such an easy group, but all right. So one of these teams that only has 10 to 20 points is going to get at least 10. No, at least 20 points. So someone's doubling their score or tripling their score,
Tripling their score.
which is pretty silly when you think about it. You have the Gorillas taking this over OG. We talked about that a bit,
Yep.
that series could really go either way, honestly. And Seattle versus OG is definitely going to be interesting. I I really shouldn't be saying Seattle since they failed me so many times, but I'm going to say Seattle.
Seattle's going to the semis.
Seattle 3-1 over Optic Gaming LA. I don't trust Seattle to take an S&D over Optic Gaming LA.
Really?
So
I don't know
I'm
why
going
you
to
had to
say
add
3-1.
over Optic Gaming LA. I don't trust
Yeah, I
Seattle to
mean the
take a
Gorillas
cert,
are
period.
the Gorillas are only 7-4 in S&D, and Optic Gaming LA is only 3-6 in S&D. But yeah, I'm gonna give the win to Seattle over the Gorillas in S&D. You
Yeah.
know,
You're just
shit's
throwing
crazy,
like
man.
we have a really logical side, and then we have your roster or your predictions. So
Hey, I think everything in Group B is relatively illogical. Like outside of Dallas, that shit can go any way, shape, or form.
yeah,
If I'm
that
being
that's
honest,
true. I mean, these
the
teams have
Group
all made
A
a lot of
one is
changes.
relatively like clear cut, even though that one is the most competitive. But so like you have different competitive uh, categories of competitive. You have top echelon competitive, which is Group A, and then you have low tier competitive, which is Group B. Like that's what you have. So yeah, stuff's wacky. Yeah, okay, yeah, that's is that correct?
I
No,
think.
Atlanta shouldn't be facing Chicago in semis. You have that mixed up. They should be facing Dallas in semis
Wait, they
for your
they
bracket.
swap A and B.
Yeah,
Oh
because
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Chicago's the second seed. Yeah, so first matchup is going to be Atlanta versus me. I'm going to have Seattle. You're going to have the LA Gorillas. That's a 3-0. GG Seattle, your miracle run's done. Even if you make it to this semifinals by some miracle, you're definitely going to get blasted by whichever team you face there. And I think you're probably in agreement with your Atlanta versus
LA.
Gorillas matchup.
Yeah, yeah. I'd change that to a very easy 3-0. I mean, it's so when we talk about speed in Call of Duty, Search and Destroy is one of those game types where it's more important for control over speed. But Atlanta has figured out how to hold that control of the map with speed, and LA's just not ready for it. They're plain and simple not ready for it. I don't think they play at the same speed. There's very few teams that play on the same speed or even close to the same speed as Atlanta, and it all just they just slide cancel everywhere, everywhere. They nonstop. They're cracked out of their minds. It's unbelievable. Simp does things that you shouldn't be doing in professional COD, and he's just out of everybody's league right now. It's not a real thing. It's just not. It's. I mean, Atlanta's unreal. Plain and simple. Unreal, unbelievable. They're gonna bring back the 4 sub meta this tournament, and you're like if the cards line up right, even like Gunrunner, they're gonna run 5 subs and just stay cracked all over the map, and it's not gonna be fun for anybody. Atlanta's just gonna tear through this tournament. So yeah, it's
Yeah,
pretty easy 3-0 against Gorillas.
yeah, definitely could be a relatively lopsided tournament since obviously we don't have Minnesota here, and unless we see another Florida team come out of here and just surprise everyone. But yeah, Atlanta over Seattle for me, or Atlanta over the Gorillas for you. Definitely going to be a bit of a blowout performance there.
For sure.
Moving on to an incredibly interesting matchup for our predictions, though. It's going to be Dallas versus Chicago. You have Dallas taking it 3-2 over Chicago. I have Chicago taking it 3-2 over Dallas. So either way, we both think it's going to be an incredibly close series, going to go to game 5. Me, I'm giving it to Chicago simply because the performance I saw out of Chicago day 1 and day 2 was miles better than the performance I saw out of Dallas day 1 and day 2. And even day 3, I would still say Chicago looked better than Dallas did. They lost to Florida, who won the event. Dallas lost to Minnesota, who got relatively smashed by Florida in the finals. And this would be the 4th time these teams match up. And even though it's absurd to say that Chicago would have a 4-0 series record over Dallas, if we see the same Dallas that we saw 2 weekends ago, and we see the same Chicago we saw 2 weekends ago, there is no way that Dallas, in my eyes, is beating Chicago's in a best-of-5 series. And if we see the best Dallas and the best Chicago, I still think Chicago takes it. The only way I see Dallas taking this is if we see a obvious. If we, this is going to sound obvious, but is if we see a better Dallas
Then a better worse Chicago. Oh yeah, I don't disagree.
It sounds obvious, but like that's what needs to happen.
Here's why I'm picking Dallas over Chicago though. How many times, and I said this whenever it was 3 games or their game 3 together. How many times has it happened where a
I'm
team
gonna
has
laugh
lost?
if at the end of the season
Whoa.
you're gonna have had said this 9 times, and Chicago will have won 9 times.
If it happens, I'll eat my own words. But I mean, like seriously, how many times has it happened where a team has beat another team 4 times in a row? It doesn't happen.
Top echelon teams at this level of game, it should not happen as frequently as it has, and that's kind of, I guess, another one of the worrying things in this matchup for Chicago Dallas. It's honestly crazy that they've beaten them this many times in a row. The reason, like, I'll bring up Dallas's stats because this is like we're saying Dallas is like a top 2 team in the game, a top 2 team. They have a losing hardpoint record at 11-14. They have a losing domination record at 6-8. The only thing they have a winning record is search and destroy, where they're 12-6. Everything else they have a losing record in, and it's because they have played Chicago 3 times and lost 3 times, and they played Atlanta once.
Yeah,
if you get rid of those losses, they have a winning record in every single game type.
For sure, absolutely. I'm saying they have to win at some point against Chicago. They have to, right? They have to. They keep running into each other. They got to win one. And that's why I'm taking Dallas this time. Like they have to. I don't care if it's Chicago's home state.
It's not outside of the realm of possibility.
I think
we both agree it's going game 5. At that point, it's a coin flip, and this coin has flipped heads for Chicago 3 times in a row. Probabilities be probabilities. It's gotta go tails eventually.
True.
Unless you know what, we get the rare occurrence and it just lands straight up. And the series just never ends.
You mean it's like the Minnesota Seattle?
It's even crazier. We get a tie in the first hard point, and we have multiple ties in that hard point. Then we have multiple ties in the dom.
That'd be
it's
sick,
just gonna
honestly.
It's gonna
be like a 3-hour game.
No, it's not even. It's like a 6-hour series at that point. If we have a tie in hard point, dom, and hard point, that's gotta be.
I mean, if that happens,
I hope if that happens, Maven and Joe are casting, because I think Maven will honestly pass out.
Yeah, he probably will. He was complaining all weekend about being too hot in his room, which was a very old man thing to say. Shout out to Maven. But I think
honestly, you know what happens? The series is just so long that it's like sumo wrestling, or not sumo wrestling. It's like tag team wrestling. Maven and Joe just like high five slap across the interweb. Chance and Benson in, or
tag team.
It's like, we're done. You guys are taking over now. This is the 3rd time we've replayed this domination. You guys are doing it this time.
Honestly, if that happens, it only solidifies my finals prediction, because if you 3-0 somebody in the semis and then you go into the finals the same day, and then you're playing against a team that went to a close game 5, it's pretty obvious you're going to be the fresher team, and I really do think that. So regardless of who wins this, I think
they're not waiting 6 hours to play though.
Yeah,
that's it. Oh, this is actually, you know what? This is totally playing out by Dallas and Chicago. They're gonna just draw a bunch so that it's like 6 hours down the road. Atlanta's like starving to death. They didn't get food or something. Their Uber driver delivered it to the wrong place with their Uber Eats or their Grubhub, and so. Atlanta's like dying. They're just like, screw it. We're just going to lose. We forfeit. We're just going to go get some food. But either way, we have Atlanta coming out with the win. If they play Dallas, if they play Chicago, and both of us agree that the finals is more than likely going to be a 3-1 for Atlanta in the end.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty obvious. Like, I think that if it was Minnesota here going into the finals, or maybe if it was Florida here going into the finals, that I might be a little bit more concerned. But every time I've seen Atlanta play Dallas, and well, we haven't seen Atlanta and Chicago play, I don't believe. It's
No, we
just
have not.
it's
At least we wouldn't. We haven't at this point, but potentially we will have if Atlanta wins their London matchup, which we all think they should, and Chicago wins their New York matchup, which we also think they should. And so they'll face off in Group A winners round one or
yes.
earlier in this tournament. So it will be a rematch for me. It won't be for you, and so should be very interesting. I think either way.
Yeah, I agree. I think that Atlanta is definitely going to be one of those teams that, Dallas is going to have a really hard time beating, like kind of like Chicago. But I really do think it comes down to the fact that, like, worst case scenario, Atlanta plays like Seattle in the semis, LA Gorillas in the semis. Like, it doesn't really matter. Like,
Yeah, they're
Atlanta's
playing
Atlanta's
Guerrilla Seattle or Optic Gaming LA, which I don't think any of us think Atlanta should lose to. So the biggest concern here is if Atlanta loses in Group A, because there's two teams in there that could potentially beat Atlanta. One of them being Chicago, the other being London. So
Yeah, I mean, if
that's
if London if London beats Atlanta, that would be impressive.
that London could be the Florida of this event potentially. Like
Yeah, I, I
that's what
also
we could see.
I also think that like L.A. Gorillas could still be like the Florida of this event as well. I think that those are
Oh,
probably that's probably my sleeper pick.
I don't think the Gorillas are going to make it out of semis.
I still think that making it to semis is impressive to say the least.
Would you
Even though
call that being a Florida though? And even though they're only making it to semis out of their group, like their group, look at it. You just got Dallas and then a team with 20 points, a team with 20 points, and you with 10.
I think saying that Florida that L.A. is going to a semis a month ago, we would have laughed at each other.
Hey, we said that in the previous podcast, and then they didn't make it to semis. They lost
I
both of their series back to back. So
Yeah, but I was still pretty impressed with their play last weekend, and I think that they're going to get better as a team. So
yeah, you'd hope the same for Seattle, but
it's
they
a
clearly haven't. So
it's about time. But
it's
yeah,
about time. Let's get it.
it's about time.
Screw it.
Somebody's
Seattle taking down Atlanta 3-0. They're going to the finals.
if Seattle if Seattle beats Atlanta in the finals 3-0, I will go on Modern Warfare and buy the Seattle Surge pack and equip it on every single one of my
You haven't
kits.
already bought it, man?
No,
They got one of the cooler team
I
designs.
did think that I was gonna buy Florida's today though, so I might actually as soon as this podcast is over because I'm like Florida
I
Mutineers is
think
my team now. So
I think it's about time we wrap up this podcast, though. So I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. I hope you all enjoy the matches. It should be, again, another really interesting series of events. And stay happy, stay healthy, and we'll see you guys next time.
later.